This is A Silent War Within, the podcast dedicated to confronting the unseen mental health battles carried by our first responder and healthcare heroes. This show is about real stories, real struggles, and real ways to survive the storm and come out stronger on the other side. For too long, stigma has kept you silent, but this is your space to bravely break that silence, share vital insights, and build a community where your well-being truly comes first, because your service deserves unwavering support.
Welcome, everybody, to A Silent War Within. We are here with a very special guest today. Unfortunately, our guest host, or our co-host, rather, is a little under the weather, so I told her to stay away. I do not want her sickness. I don't like being sick. I have man colds, and that's no good for anybody. So as you guys know, this is episode either 10 or 11. I'll have to go back and look and edit that little part in. But 10 or 11, so we're really going strong. We've got about 4,000 streams so far. Really, really excited about the future and everything that is coming for us. We've gotten some very, very cool apparel companies reaching out to us about apparel. So we are experiencing some growth. And of course, you can always find us on all the social media channels, the Instagram, the TikTok, of course, the Facebook, all those things. I like saying the in front of it because my father says I sound very old when I call it the anything. So that's just my thing. But our special guest today, Logan Lancaster, right?
No, just now switched.
Just Nix. That's right. You got married.
Yeah.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
So we found Logan on TikTok, where we find a lot of our guests. You guys may have heard me talk about in the past. I think that TikTok is this generation's biggest form of communication. So finding people there becomes very easy. So I think that's the next communication wave for our generation. So finding people there becomes very easy. Logan, when we found her video, you were doing a research study about first responders. So it really piqued my interest. So why don't you give us your story? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what kind of schooling you're in, what kind of background you have, so we can get to know who Logan Nix is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently a therapist in training. So I'm finishing my clinical mental health counseling master's program. And kind of how I got jumped into the first responder trauma group is my husband. He went into the academy when I was finishing my undergrad, and we were dating at the time. And so, I mean, it was all hands on deck when I was finishing school. He was starting school. So we were all kind of like focusing on what we were doing, but also he was very much so, we studied together a lot. And so when it came to like looking at his stuff, you see like all the training and all the millions of different things he's learning for the physical impacts of the job. And then you get to the line that's like, you'll have mental health effects and you will see trauma in this job. That was kind of like all you get. It was like that, and then know when to seek help. It was kind of what they say. They're like, yeah, know when to seek help, but we're not going to say like anything else about it. And so as a wife, obviously your first concern is like, oh, my husband's going to go into like a field where he's going to be at risk for a bunch of different things. And so you're thinking like the dangerous side of the job, but then you hear the statistics that they're more likely to die by suicide than by line of duty death.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a wife, you're like, oh, and they're also not really providing the mental health support or education at the beginning. So now that's where I kind of jumped in and was like, okay, like I'm going to be going to school for this. So I think I'm going to go ahead and like try to learn all the things about your job and what's happening in your brain and how trauma is going to impact you, so I can be your support system, because there doesn't sound like you're going to have that much outside of home. And that was my worry. And so I think that I kind of delved in with him. So like I was kind of learning the terminology, learning the kind of things he would see. I mean, I grew up in a medical family, and so some of the stuff wasn't new, but it was just kind of a thing where I could kind of be in the same page as him, learning it. And my concerns kind of moved when I started realizing that there wasn't that option for other first responders as well. And not every spouse is going to have like the clinical, like mental health side education. So there's like just not a lot of education for the responders. There's not much education for the families that are coming into it. So then me with my passion, I wanted to do therapy for first responders, but I didn't want to be like all the other first responders that I'd heard about, like the therapist, sorry, that I've heard about, because I've heard just a bunch of negative experiences with therapists, being in the sense that they say they're trauma informed and they don't know the first responder. They don't know the job or
Hmm.
the culture. Um, and it was kind of concerning to me because I was like, if I wasn't in the position to be able to know these things about my husband, what would happen if he was in a mental health crisis? Like, who would help him? And just because
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to learn those things, I was able to be that. But there's so many other responders that don't have that, or people that could see that or try to understand it. So I started wanting to better educate myself, really. Like when I started posting on social media, the first Google form I think I sent out was asking first responders just questions about their experience with mental health. Like, how was their experiences? What kind of things like keep them from seeking mental health care, or what things they need from family members, and, like, I just had a whole list of things, and I mean, it went viral, and I had over 1,000 responses from first responders, and I, like, went home that night and sat with my husband, and I was like, "This is insane," because all the things that I was worrying about for the field were kind of, like, being shown to me, like, they were kinda
Hmm.
just popping up, like, there is a lack, there is a gap in the care, there's a lack of education, like, all around, so that's why I kinda started posting, was to better aid myself so that I could be a good therapist for first responders in the future. Because the one thing that that kind of struck me when I was doing it was the amount of people that said they would not see a therapist that was not a first responder. And I was kind of shocked by that because obviously I'm not in the field, so I don't know those things. But now looking back and looking at all the things that I found in the research and just the experiences that have been shared with me, it's so blatantly obvious as to why. Like, if you're just a trauma informed counselor, you're not going to be able to provide the effective care for first responders because you just don't get it. You don't know them.
Yeah, one of the things that Kim always says is the fact that she's gone to counselors before, and by the time we're done, we're feeling like we need to help them because our
Yep.
experiences can be so intense
Yep.
that it can overwhelm a lot. And I've experienced it too. And it's kind of it just blows my mind that there's not more emphasis on, because I'm sure you can rattle off statistics right off the top of your head about, you know, first responder mental health struggles and suicide rates.
Right.
But we do have a very high suicide rate. So you would think that there
Mhm.
would be more focus put on that, and there's just simply not.
Right.
What so was the aha moment that time when you looked in the book and you saw the just the little line of hey, you're gonna have some mental health struggles, and that was it? Or was it something else?
Honestly, that was probably it. Like, I think I, like, can envision it, like, almost to a T. Like, we were at his
Yeah,
father's house sitting at the kitchen table studying until midnight, and I was like, "Oh, I wanna know, like, what mental health things that they're gonna talk about in the book," because I was, like, a nerd about, like, brain trauma science, like, that whole stuff, and I was like, "Oh, I wanna know what they're gonna share because right now you're learning everything medical about every patient you could potentially have,"
right.
and I went to the page and I was like, we get like 2 or 3 sentences about mental health, and it's like, I didn't think it was fair that y'all study so much to be able to take care and provide care for every single person, and no matter what a medical episode or whatever event could happen, yet you have no clue what really is going on in your body or how to help or what that really means, which I that was my aha moment because I was like, "I can't just leave that there like that."
So tell me about some of your specific research areas, because you sound very educated on this, and I love the fact that you are so passionate about it when you talk. You can tell that there's some love behind that that drives your motivation to learn more about this. So tell me about some of your specific research topics.
Yeah, definitely. So the biggest one I think is, again, I said I'm nerding out about like the brain and everything. I loved researching trauma in the brain. I think originally before my husband decided he was doing first responder, I'd always wanted to specialize in trauma. And specifically for first responders, I just find it like so fascinating and everybody thinks I'm crazy, but if you really look at what's happening in your brain, every single reaction, behavior, or statistic for first responders makes so much sense because your brain is not wired to handle trauma. I don't know if you want me to jump into that immediately or if we can go just
Yeah.
listen to the rest of the topics, but
No, just
I'll go on a soapbox.
yeah, talk about a little bit of the specific research that you've done, and then we'll
Yeah.
dive into the science of the brain because I'm a nerd for that too.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, so that definitely was one area. The second was most likely like my concern was, as also I was going through school, I was learning like all things trauma. I had classes on acute grief, trauma, stress, management, like the whole thing. And my other concern was, as I was doing my education to potentially be able to counsel first responders, I found almost no education on first responders on my end either. Like, he didn't have education for first responder mental health, and even me, the problem that I kept seeing was first responders kept getting lump summed in with veterans, which is not a bad thing, but I think there's so many distinctions between the 2 and how you need to treat and, like, be involved with them in a therapeutic setting, and, that was just not the case for me either, and so the research on counselor competency and what things are required to work with first responders, and then the things that just lack. I think majority of my research is kind of to poke the bear and say, like, there's a big gap. There is a lack of everything, and we kind of need to build a bridge. And so I think majority of it is just kind of pointing out the issues,
Yeah.
especially for the counseling side, because on our end, it's like majority of people see us as the professional, so we should know everything. And majority of the time, a lot of counselors will act like they know everything. And I'm not trying to bash counselors, but like they will try to act like they know exactly what you're dealing with and what you're feeling without really knowing you or what you
Hmm.
do. And I think that was a big concern, obviously. The other area is definitely family, home life. I think that's a passion of mine because I live it, and it's been something I've been intentional about the whole time I've been married, and with him since the academy. So those are probably my main big 3 for sure, and coping skills and stuff with the trauma in the brain for sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about the science of the brain. You keep mentioning that you're a nerd for the science, so I want to hear what you found, what your research has shown. What kind of anatomy and physiology lesson can you give us about how we as first responders, how our brains react, what they do, and some of the tools that maybe we can use to cope with some of the things?
yeah, definitely. So first and foremost, it's obviously your nervous system. Everybody knows the fight or flight or the work mode that you go into when the tones drop or when you get a call. That is your brain is like genuinely being switched on. So, nerd term, it's your sympathetic nervous system that's coming on. And so that is triggering your brain. It's saying, hey, there's danger here. There's a threat to somebody or myself, and we need to figure out how to get away from it without being harmed. And so it's your brain's actual hardwire to protect itself. It's self-preservation, which I find it fascinating because everybody's like, "Oh, it's so bad," but it's really not. And in hindsight, it makes so
Uh-huh.
much sense as to why it's happening. But then there's things that come up when that happens. So when you get triggered, you like your heart rate increases. Obviously, your pupils can dilate, so you can have better vision. Your blood vessels constrict. There's so many physical things that happen. And while obviously some of those things can be helpful, for like say you're running into a fire and you have better vision, sure, and you're being able to handle the stress and making those calls and decisions while you're on scene, 100%. But the problem that I kept finding with that was for first responders specifically, I mean, obviously, y'all get calls sometimes
Mhm.
back to back to back. And then the kicker is your brain has to come down from the sympathetic at some point. You can't just ride the high the whole time. But to switch down to the parasympathetic, your brain takes 30 minutes to an hour. And majority of y'all's calls do not
Wow.
have 30 minutes to an hour to come
Mhm.
down and switch off. And it goes hand in hand when you come home and get off shift and you're trying to decompress and you haven't had an hour to let your brain come down, you're going to go home with that sympathetic nervous system triggered. You're going to have kids running around and it's just getting triggered. You're irritable. You're getting frustrated with people. I mean, it's just how you're wired. And if you don't have the time to come down or really decompress, there's issues there for sure. And just the amount of calls y'all get, there's really not much time on shift to have that decompression to come down. So sometimes it'll stay on like all shift. And obviously there's physical symptoms like long-term effects of that, but outside of that, like the PTSD side of it and like the symptoms there are also really cool. Not for people experiencing it, but the way your brain is wired is really interesting. So, like, if you go into a call and you are experiencing a traumatic event, that fight or flight we just talked about will kick on, release all those negative hormones, the stress hormones. And then at that point, your brain, imagine it, I always say, like, it takes a picture. And when it takes this picture, it doesn't just log what it's seeing, it logs what it smells, where it's at, the location, the weather, the time of day, all of it. It will log every single thing around that. So your brain normally, when it has a memory, will log it in, like I say, it's a filing folder in the back of your brain, your hippocampus. And it just normally gets logged, and you don't have to worry about the memory. It doesn't bother you, it doesn't come up. Traumatic memory gets stuck because of how emotionally driven they are. They stay like open in your amygdala, which is like the emotional center of your brain. And so when they're open, I just imagine it as a big bubble. It's a fat bubble in the back of your head for that event. And all those things that I was just mentioning, like the senses, the time of day, the emotions that were involved, where it was at, they are like sensors on this bubble. So basically, they're like detonators that can go off whenever you see that kind of weather come up, or you drive past the location of that event, or you smell something that was a smell at the event you were at. It will trigger that memory to pop back up. Your nervous system kicks on, the sympathetic comes on, thinks you're in danger again. And they're like, oh my gosh, your brain says, I
Mm-hmm.
have to get out of this. I cannot do this again. We're going to do everything we can to get away from this. So your brain will literally think you are back there and you have no clue why. And I personally just weird out about it because you think first responders and you're like, that sounds like such a negative thing. But in reality, all it is your brain trying to protect you, and it just hasn't had time to learn that it's safe. Like, you haven't given it enough time to learn that, "Hey, I'm safe. This is not a danger to me anymore." And I think that's, like, the biggest that the brain biology that I think is, effective for the first responders for sure.
So obviously for me, and I think other responders, one of the things that when you say that, the thing that immediately comes to my mind is how do you get rid of the bubbles then? Is it talk therapy? Is it EMDR? Like what is what's the road that we can take to get rid of those bubbles that are associated with all those bad things that trigger us?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think there's obviously a lot of roads. I think EMDR is probably one of the best for, like, the super severe big bubbles. But you imagine, like, first responders, sometimes there's multiple bubbles and there's sensors on each bubble, so there's a lot going on, so it's extremely complex. But in reality, there's so much that goes into kind of sitting and having that communication and just being able to talk about it. And I think that's why I kind of go back to, like, the psychoeducation of it all, is like learning what's happening and why you're happening, or why your brain's reacting
Mhm.
that way. It's kind of like, if you learn that you have these triggers, we can kind of pinpoint what that memory is. So basically, like, EMDR will go in, and the whole thing is just, it's reprocessing. It is taking the memory, and like I said, you're making it to where it's now safe. So that bubble, the EMDR works differently than talk therapy, but a lot of ways, there are a lot of different therapeutic interventions, obviously, for trauma that you can seek like professional help for. But essentially, all it is taking those big traumatic bubbles, and you then are able to process them, let yourself know it's safe, bring it to the front, and then be able to calm your nervous system while you're thinking of that big trauma. And then your brain is allowing it to go to the hippocampus to then go into your filing folder. So then you don't have to worry about it. Those are obviously for like the bigger things. So I don't necessarily think that that's like everything. Like, obviously, all this, like the
Yeah.
hard calls that y'all have, it obviously would be a little different. But for the PTSD side of it, I definitely think the therapeutic intervention is super important. But I think, again, that goes back to counselors being very competent with first responders, because I think, again, the amount and the quantity of calls and trauma that y'all see is more than the average person will see in their whole life. So the competency, I think, is key when you're finding a therapist for that, for sure.
So I got two points to make
Mhm.
here. The first is for somebody like me, the first time I did EMDR, it was a big mystery. It wasn't really explained well. So, can you demystify what EMDR is for us? I mean, you may not have to walk us through a session, but kind of explain
Yeah.
what those letters represent and kind of what it does, what it means.
Yeah, so I'm also not, I do not have my EMDR certification. I don't want no counselors to come for me right now. But it's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So your brain, there's different somatic things, which is like all the feelings in your body and where you're feeling certain things. So it's kind of taking your big traumatic memory, and like I said, it's really like all it is just reprocessing, and each therapeutic intervention does it a different way. EMDR uses different somatic things like tapping or watching something scan past your eyes. And again, they're not going to explain it because it really, some people think it's like mystical, magical, and it like
Yeah.
does whatever it does, which it kind of is, and your brain just I responds to it that way. Personally, I'm not trained in that. I can't really speak to that
Yeah,
side of it, but it is essentially just pulling that memory to the forefront and then doing somatic or those eye movement things to let your body know that you're here. That traumatic memory is not affecting you. It's not hurting you. And those sessions are kind of to then reprocess that memory to let it know it's safe to go back
I
into your
gotcha.
long term.
So then the second point is you mentioned looking for the right counselors, and that kind of thing is really important. I've shared some of the bad experiences Kim and I have had. So, what are we looking for when a first responder is going out to look for a counselor? What are we looking for, and what kind of common misconceptions do you see from the counselor side, based on your research? Where are counselors missing the mark?
Yeah, definitely. I think for first responders seeing this and like learning to seek like what kind of therapist they need. For one, you're not going to mesh with every counselor just in general. That's going to be the
Hmm.
hard thing. But I think it's already such a vulnerable spot for first responders to take the step to push the stigma to seek mental health care, and going and bouncing around from therapist to therapist is exhausting. It's ridiculous to have to explain yourself a million times and have to act and explain like what you're doing, because that I think is the biggest problem is therapists don't know the job, they don't know the terminology, and this is the same, like I'll talk about it a little bit later when it comes to, like, families and stuff, but there's a lot of first responder counsel or trauma-informed counselors that don't understand the parts of the job, so majority of the time when you walk into that session, either you're gonna trauma dump and they're
Hmm.
gonna start freaking out, or you're
Yep.
gonna trauma dump and all they're gonna be sitting there doing is, "What does that mean? Oh, what is that? What is that tool? Oh, what is this
Yeah,
medical thing? I don't know what you're talking about," and all you're gonna be doing your session
that's
is
exactly right.
educating the counselor.
Hmm.
And to me, that's actually insane. So when I say looking for a therapist, I think there's an issue. There's not enough of them. They're not affordable. They're not accessible. In the same way that y'all get all the health benefits, y'all should also get benefits for mental health to be able to do that. Um, but it's just really hard to find that, particularly when I say you look for it, find a counselor that has a certification that is specific to first responders only, not trauma informed, which there are amazing ones. There are some that are really competent and work really hard. But for first responders to just kind of jump over the finding a million people and seeing who fits, it is finding someone that has that training or a certification or extra education outside of their masters to specialize in first responders, or ones that have experience like going on ride outs, going and being a part of the
Hmm.
community, going to get to know first responders. Because I think that's why I post so much on social media. It's not just for me to give to first responders, it's literally for me to learn from their experiences, because I can read as many statistics and read as many books as I want from professionals when you guys are really the experts on your job. You are the ones that know your job the best and the impacts and how it actually affects you. So why am I the one that's gonna go read all these books as if I'm gonna know the magical answer without being integrated with y'all? So I think that's the biggest thing is if you have a counselor that's not open or hasn't gone on ride outs or integrated themselves with the field or has a family member or father or husband, wife, whatever in the field, I would say to look for that for sure.
So, is that a normal thing in your education to kind of have to pick a specialty, if you will, or is that something that's available for you becoming a counselor? Can you pick a specialty of something, kind of like doctors do, or is it just you're a general counselor and that's it, and then you kind of get to do your own thing for a while?
It's majority of the CMHC's clinical mental health counseling programs are you get a broad everything and you get kind of thrown in. You can after post graduation and post licensure, you can take certain classes or courses or certifications. So it's not required
I
to
got you.
do like to pick a specialty. But afterwards, a lot of people will choose to like be trauma certified or or EMDR is a separate certification.
Right.
But there's a lot of different things you can choose afterwards, but a lot of people claim to be trauma informed, but don't see the side of first responders which is where I think the issue lies for sure.
Is there specialty training for first responder mental health from a counselor side? Like if a counselor wanted to be first responder trained, that's something they could do?
Yeah, so this is something I've been really actually stoked about. There's a lady who which is it's what I'm gonna do immediately when I get out, obviously, but it's called I don't know if I can like plug stuff on
Yeah, go
here.
ahead.
It's called Academy Hour, and it's a website where it is a lady that she got out, did grad school, went to be a therapist, and when she got out, she only wanted to focus on, like, the, cops was her passion, so she worked, like, in department, and she saw the gap, and so she took the initiative to create so she stopped counseling, she stopped doing the entire therapy thing, and she jumped in, created her entire thing about just training counselors to, be a part of, like, first responder lives and experiences. But the part that sold me on it, because, like, you can say and you can read and do all the education about it, and I feel like that sometimes isn't enough. Part of her, courses require you to, like, watch clips of certain calls that first responders go on from cops, EMS, fire, and
Mm.
kind of, like, let you see it. Like, you can see the sides of things. So, like, there's, like, disclaimers of, like, you're gonna see trauma in this thing, but that if you're gonna work with first responders, you're gonna have to see it regardless. So
Yeah.
which is I'm really excited for. I haven't taken it yet, but I can't wait to take it once I graduate, so
So how long have you got?
a year.
Oh, you're getting closer day
Getting
by
there.
day, day by day.
Yep, that's for sure.
So I love that you do this research. I'm probably more excited to have you than I should be on the show because watching all your stuff, I'm like, this girl gets it.
Mm,
And I think that so many people miss the mark in that we experience so much trauma and we're just, this is naturally a thankless job and you kind of, have that mentality when you come in anyway. But once you start seeing all the bad stuff and you start to get the little triggers and those little bubbles, it's
mm,
really exciting to hear somebody acknowledge that. I think we, for so long, have come from a suck it up kind of mentality. Even I don't know if you follow any of the EMS people on TikTok, but EMS Avenger, no, it wasn't EMS Avenger. Shade Tree Cardiology was with us
mm,
and he was awesome. Greg's a great guy. He's been posting all of our interview in little snippets, which I appreciate. But there was one guy who came on there and commented and said, this is a job you signed up for. You just have to suck it up. You see traumatic things, suck it up.
mhm,
And he responded like, this is not when you get that call that's going to rattle you, that's going to put you down a little bit, it's
mm,
going to surprise you. And that's somebody that people that speak like that to me are people who have not experienced that one call yet. And it's
mm,
wild the way that our brains work to me that one call can be something that you are not expecting. One of the calls that just broke
mm,
me in half was this 87-year-old grandmother. We
mm,
were, you know, working a cardiac arrest on her husband.
mm.
And she stops me and she says, just let me hold his hand one more time. I know this will be the last time I ever hold his hand. And I was just, oh my gosh, immediate emotions and that rush
Yeah,
of tears and just like she's losing her whole life.
mm,
And she desperately wants me to save him, and I know that I can't. So it was that call that was just like that wasn't supposed to bother me. This was an 87-year-old Pepaw that
yeah,
had lived his life to entirety, and this was his
yeah,
time to go. You think that will not? I'm tangled up over here. Um, you think that would not bother somebody that had been in EMS so long, but man, it was just
mm.
wild the way that my brain interpreted that and just did something with it and caused this overflow of emotion.
Yeah, I think that's also another point that I think is just fascinating because even my husband talks about this. He's like, it's not the person that passed. If it's a call that someone passed, it's not the
Yeah.
person that passed. It's the mother
Mhm.
screaming for their child. It is
Ugh.
the wife losing their loved one at a young age. It is the kids watching their like it is everything outside. I mean, obviously the person that like the patient you lost is rough, but when you think about it, majority of what my husband comes home with is the people that are left behind. And that is probably some of the harder stuff that I've heard from, his end at least.
So that's a good point to segue. So where do you see the misconceptions at? Because the public has their image of us. Where's the misconceptions there? But kind of also, what's mental health's misconception of us? The mental health community, the counselors, the psychiatrists, the psychologists. Like, where's the miscommunication at, and where's the misconception happening at?
Mm,
Is it
yeah,
that we're not open enough, and we're not showing the public kind of what we deal with, or
mm,
is it something completely different that they just don't see it in the light that we do?
yeah. I think that's a really good question. I think definitely the stigma is gonna impact it in some area, way, shape, or form, but I think most of the time as somebody who's not in the field, I have looked at first responders like heroes. Like, you put them on a pedestal, they're the superheroes of the entire town. And majority of other people will say the same thing. And I think that that also just puts an extra amount of pressure on first responders to withhold that and uphold that. And on top of the stigma and feeling like you can't share your mental health struggles and this and that, it's gonna be hard to, like, tell the general public, like, "Yeah, this is actually terrifying and actually horrible, and it's actually impacting me so bad," when they're kind of the people that y'all are picking up. They're the kind of people y'all are going to in calls and stuff. So I don't know if it's because it might make first responders feel like the public won't trust them or not, but I think that that could impact it, and definitely the stigma for sure. But for counselors, I think it just goes back to the fact that they just don't really get that side of it, and they, like I said, they lump in with veterans that all the time. You'll get lumped in with veterans, or they just kind of be like, "Oh, first responders can go hand in hand with veteran treatment or this and that." And then you think about it, majority of people that are even coming for trauma-informed therapy is having 1 or 2 traumatic events happening to them, and then they kinda go away from it. And I like to, like, think of it in the sense that first responders, they go to counseling to talk about something that happened the other day, and they're gonna wake up and go see it again, something else again tomorrow. And that's kind of the disconnect there, is they kind of are coming in expecting it, like, first responders to come in and be completely resolved or to avoid all their triggers, which isn't even possible. Like, triggers are unavoidable. You're not going to be able to not drive down that road because your patient coded over there. Or, like, you can't avoid majority of your triggers
Right.
when that's kind of the calls you're on. And that's the job y'all do. But the thing I keep hearing from first responders is, like, either I get recommended to get a new job and quit, I need to take a
Mhm.
break from my job, or I should probably find something else to be enjoy. But it's just that misconception that they don't get the job and the lifestyle it really is. And I say it is as a culture and a population because first responders themselves have their entire own bubble that should be addressed. And I think the misconception from the public is kind of like they're heroes and they're tough as nails and nothing bothers them and they see all this crazy stuff all the time. And I mean, everybody knows the question. I mean, they'll ask you
No,
straight up. They'll ask you, and you're just sitting here like, "Why would you ask me about the most traumatic event that I've been
we
on?"
literally hate that
Yeah.
question. We have
Oh,
talked about
100%.
that so much.
100%.
What is
And
the
it
worst day you've ever had?
Yep,
Or what's the worst thing you've ever
yep.
seen?
Yeah, let me
Stop.
just
Stop
pull all
asking that
this trauma
question.
out of my
Yeah.
head for you. Yeah.
Stop asking that question. It's awful. It is taking us back to such horrible places.
I know, and that's a part of the thing I think that they just don't know. Like, it's just there's no awareness at all, and I think that if there's more public education, just in general, for first responders, for the public, for counselors, for families, like, just having the awareness that, like, this job is super cool. They ride on really cool trucks, they get to do really cool interventions in the ambulance, they get to run around in their cop cars, like, everything is so cool. But there is a side of it that's not cool, and it's just part of the job that you accept when you take it, and you have to figure out how to navigate that kind of on your own and in silence. And it's not fair, and I think that that's kind of the stigma I'm trying to be able to kind of voice it for the first responders that don't feel comfortable doing that.
I think there is, my gosh, there's such a stigma from all different directions. I think we talk
Yes.
about stigma as a whole, but there's
Mhm.
stigma within our firehouses, within our police stations, within our EMS stations. There's, I don't know if it would be called a stigma, but certainly an expectation from the public that you kind of hit on. But one thing I experienced, especially from my family, and my dad listens to this podcast, and one of the things that he said that really just made me, do the dog head look like, what are you talking about? He's like, dude, I had no idea that you felt the way you did. I just
Right.
always thought that you were tough. And I can remember just saying, like, coming to him and going, it's been a crap day, just
Mhm.
in very, very loose terms, not getting into any
Right.
details.
Right.
And it was like, I never really did tell him any of that stuff. So I think there's a little bit of a stigma at home to not drag, because we love our family. We don't want to drag them down the rabbit hole that we're
Yep.
going down. We don't want them to experience the trauma that we have experienced, secondarily from us.
Yeah.
So, what can families do to kind of be more present or more relevant or ask the right questions to protect themselves from that trauma? Because we don't want to give them trauma. That's just coming from my personal point of view. We don't want to give that
Right.
trauma to them, but
Absolutely.
also we want that hug when we walk in the door and kind of be able to, have a cry or two. I'm a crier. So,
Oh, yeah. Yep. My husband is the same way, so am I, so we get it. This is probably also one of my favorite things I talk about because I think it's ridiculously huge because I've heard that comment that you said you don't wanna re-traumatize your
right.
family from so many responders, but it makes so much sense, but then how much more isolating is that for you? Like, separating
Oh,
you
absolutely.
so much from that side of your life, and it really is, like, y'all's jobs is your life, like, it is part of your identity.
Hmm.
You can't separate it the way you can separate from a 9 to 5 closing your laptop office job. It's not the same, and I think obviously families need to know that in general. There's 3 things that I kind of harp on a lot when it comes to families, and I think first and foremost is, like, education. Again, I all I talk about is freaking education. Education
Could have
for
been
the
a school
families.
teacher.
Yeah, really. But education for the families of, like, just if y'all are gonna be on shift a lot of your life, there is going to be a language barrier. You cannot avoid it. You're gonna speak differently
Huh.
on shift than you are at home. You're not gonna use the same terminology, you're not gonna say the same phrases as you are at home. So when you go home and you're trying to share your day, you're having to alter almost every single thing you're saying
Hmm.
for your family to understand it. This is something me and my husband had kind of figured out coming home because I was so nerdy about his school when he was in the academy that he would come home and he would start rattling off terminology and saying all the things he was doing on shift and this and that. And I was just like, yep, yep, I'm rolling. I'm rocking. I got it. I'm rocking with you. I know exactly what we're talking about. And he was like, that is so relieving because the amount of times I hear people say that they have to constantly explain themselves, like they're coming home from a rough shift. They just want to talk to you about their feelings and all they're doing is coming home and having to explain the terminology. "Oh, what is that? Oh, what do you mean? I have no clue what you're talking about. Oh, I don't know what that is." And then they kinda just shut you down. And so I think education on just the basic, like, you don't I'm not saying go to the academy. I'm not saying read the massive fire book. But just like the small little things of education, like listening to your husband and learning, or your spouse or family member, whatever it may be, listening to like the things they use on a daily basis. Like the
Hmm.
amount of things I know EMS related, and I've never touched foot in an ambulance before, is actually insane. But it's just like the listening, the active listening that you just take part in when they come home from a good day. I would not push trying to investigate and learn things on a bad day. But obviously on a good day, like learning the terminology and the skills so that when he does have a bad day or when they do have a bad day, they can come home and know that you are a safe place to talk because you not only will listen, but you can actually kind of understand what they're saying without them having to waste all their energy like just talking about what they're doing rather than what they're feeling. That's one that I love a lot. I think boundaries, like you were saying, you don't wanna re-traumatize. I think that's one of the biggest ones too, because obviously if you don't know where your wife stands and you don't know where you stand on what to share,
Hmm.
you're gonna be walking on eggshells on how to explain something or if you should say something or if you shouldn't say something, and then you're bottling stuff up, and it can just create a lot of different things. And I think if first responders would sit down with their spouse or their loved one and say, "Hey, like, I wanna be able to share this part of my life with you because sometimes I do struggle. What things are you comfortable with hearing, and and I'm gonna tell you what things I'm comfortable with sharing." So for first responders, that could look like I'm comfortable sharing, like, pretty much everything, but I'm not gonna go into the nitty-gritty details so it doesn't, like, trigger in my brain. And then for the spouses, a lot of them are moms for sure, so, like, a lot of them don't like kid calls. So they'll say, "Hey, like, I can listen to whatever you wanna talk about, but don't tell me about any of your peds calls, like, I don't wanna hear it." Or they don't wanna hear anything blood related, like, people are just different about other things,
Hmm.
but everybody's gonna be individual in their marriage or whatever, in their family, dynamic. So I think sitting down and having that conversation is super important because if you don't know where the other person stands, you're never going to really know if you're pushing or you're not saying anything or you're struggling and isolating yourself, which can create so much more. But I think being able to have those boundaries for yourself and your spouse just allows more open and safe communication that y'all aren't worrying about what's happening. And I think that goes hand in hand with expectations as well. Like, y'all can get off shift, and then people at home are like, "Hey, like, I'm ready for you to jump into mom duty, dad duty, like, household responsibilities, we're going doing this," and they don't ask or kind of
Mhm.
have flexible expectations. So something like my husband and I do, he'll get off shift and call me and tell me like good shift or bad shift. And then if it's bad, he'll be like, hey, like rough shift. I don't know if I'm going to be able to like jump right in immediately when I get home. I may have to go on a run afterwards. I may have to sit in the car for 30 minutes, or I may have to just jump in the shower. Obviously, when there's kids involved, that can be not always feasible, and that's fair. But I think just the borderline like communication of like, hey, like I didn't have a good call, so I might not be there mentally for you right now, or I might be a little bit more on edge, just so your spouse can be like in the know so that they don't push too much or that they can see that and be aware of it and acknowledge it for you.
All right, so I love all of that, and I'm gonna tell you what my wife and I do. I got
Okay.
really lucky. I married a NICU nurse, so she
Perfect.
kind of understands my world.
Yeah.
She has ridden on the ambulance with us from a nursing standpoint. She kinda knows where I'm at,
Mhm.
but one of the things that we had to realize was so this is and I don't know how religious you are. I'm deeply rooted Christian.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we talk about a lot when we are counseling with other married couples is communication is key. I don't think that's just a religious thing. I think that's across the
Yeah.
board.
Right.
Um, Communication is key, and I guess it was about 6 months ago we unlocked something that we didn't know we had. We've always said that marriage is not 50-50, marriage is 100-100. And
Mm.
we just celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary, and she said something to me a few weeks ago at our son's birthday that really was like, wow, that that tuned my brain in. She said, I need 140 from you today. Like
Mm.
I'm only at 60. She's like, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I need 140. And I was like, all right, challenge accepted. Like I'm
Yeah.
there. But we figured out that talking to each other that way, and over the years we've done it numerous times, but really talking to each other in that way, telling each other exactly what we need
Yeah.
helps a whole lot for us. There was one particular call, and I share it all the time. It was my child drowning call that I've shared on the show numerous times, but it was really, really traumatic. And she was there every step of the way. She was, hey, what can I do for you? Let's go get these folks a gift basket. Let's go see them. Let's go, ease some of that for you. And she really helped me a lot through that. But I think one of the things that started that is me being open enough to call and say, I just had something really bad happen. I need you to just listen. Cause
Mm-hmm.
mine is obviously, as you can tell, I'm a talker. Mine is obviously, I have to talk it out. I have to have
Yeah.
somebody, whether it's my dad, whether it's my wife, whether it's a coworker, I have to have that decompression of saying it again out loud.
Mm.
And I almost feel like my brain releases a little bit of that stress. It still forms
Yeah.
those bubbles naturally,
Right.
but there's a little bit of a sigh of relief when I say it all again and walk through it again, especially calls that are hard. And that particular call, I just felt like I did everything wrong. But after I walked through it time and time again, it took a few times for that one. I was
Right.
like, no, that medication dosage was right. That
Mhm.
intubation was at perfect length of the ET tube, like all those things. And I was able to walk back through it and feel a little bit better about it. So, is there anything beyond what we've already said that spouses could be actually practicing, putting into practice in their homes that would alleviate some of that stress that we feel or that emotional toll that we feel when we have those bad calls or bad runs or whatever?
Yeah. I think just the flexibility with it. I think that every day is going to be different for you guys,
Mm,
and it's not. Y'all are never going to know. So like, y'all may have a wedding you have to go to, and you may have had the worst call of your life,
been
and
there.
it's right. So it's like, it's just you're going to have to be flexible. I think that is probably besides communication, like you're saying, it's just flexibility and knowing that if your partner has a rough shift or something's going on or something like one of their calls was super traumatic, you have to be able to pivot. You have to be able to switch and reconsider everything in support of your spouse. I think there's going to be a lot of compromise. And I love the way you said that because there's a lot of days my husband comes home and he is at a 30. And that is
Yeah.
fine. I may have had that's the thing is like, I may have had a bad day, but it was not as bad as my husband's. I will pick up the slack and I'm going to be there and do whatever he needs and let him cope the way he needs to.
So I think one of the things that, and I've seen this with numerous of my friends and myself, I am. really a busybody, and not in the sense of like getting into people's business, but more so in the sense that I want my life to be 100 miles an hour all the time.
Mhm.
So I pick up all this extra stuff. And I'm not talking about extra work. I'm talking about like, okay, currently I'm in a master's program.
Mm,
I'm in Bible school through our church.
mhm.
I do weddings on the side. I'm an ordained minister. I have all these I said master's program. I'm a
Yep.
manager of a large organization. Like I like for my life to be jam-packed worth of stuff. And throughout my career, what I've noticed is, and Kim's the same way, but she's like that because she's got real bad ADHD. So
Mm.
she likes to organize things, and she likes to just take a job and just pull it all out and redo it. And I'm like, what are you doing? It always looks like a disaster. But we love her for it because that's how our supply room stays organized. But like, is that a coping mechanism? Because I feel like that's a coping mechanism.
100%, because when I was talking about your nervous system kicking on all the time and being on a high, it has all those hormones pump. I mean, it's the epinephrine, adrenaline, it's the cortisol, it's like the whole nine is just pumping through you all the time. But the thing is, when you come down to that parasympathetic, you're decompressing. It's called rest and digest for a reason, and your body returns to normal function, which means everything slows down. And obviously, like when you're in that fight or flight, you're not really thinking emotionally, you're trying to think logically to get out of there. So when you're resting and digesting, all those emotions are coming in, you're relaxing, your heart rate's dropping, you're getting tired, you're getting this, and that's majority of the time when you're going to be left with your thoughts. And I hear that from a lot of first responders of like it's go 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 all the time, and that's why you see like the adrenaline junkies, because your brain is wired that way. Y'all
Wired
run
that way.
calls and stay in adrenaline all the time. And it's not like it's just like y'all can just, I mean, you can turn it off, but sometimes it's not enjoyable for y'all. I mean, it's just blatantly honest. So, but it could be like just filling the gap of the adrenaline and the go, go, go to be able to like continue at that pace. Cause sometimes when you do slow down, it feels a little more chaotic because you're left with a lot more.
Well, that's what I always said a long time ago. Not so much now. Now it's just the fact that I've put myself in all these roles that
Right.
takes my time. But a long time ago, I would go, go, go because, and I've told my wife this, it silenced the ghosts.
Yep.
It made them be quiet if my mind was on something else. And for
Yep.
a long time, I had many, many ghosts that I almost felt like were, and this is going to sound crazy, but and it was those bubbles that you described. And all
Mm,
I can think about, and this is a side note, the only thing I can think about, I don't know if you've watched any of our other TikTok material or anything else, but there was, when Shade Tree Cardiology was on with us, we were talking about cardiology, and he was using really big cardiology terms, which just excites me.
right.
And I love cardiology. And he said, talk nerdy to me. Well, every time you're talking about the brain, all I can hear is him in my ear going, talk nerdy to me.
Yep. Yep.
you know, I love that. I love all this. I love, love, love listening to this. I could sit here and talk to you all day about this.
Yep.
But I think that there's such a plethora of ghosts, uh, that we as first responders just naturally deal with. And it's, how do you get them to be quiet?
Yeah, I think that just the coping mechanisms in general, like I had messaged you saying unorthodox coping mechanisms, and I didn't say that to say they're wrong or they're bad, because I will back them 10 toes down. The unorthodox methods work. You dark humor, top one, everybody's
Oh
favorite.
yeah.
No, biologically, it works. When you laugh, your body is releasing positive mood boosting hormones. So, and not only that, but it triggers your parasympathetic, and it triggers your body to come down from fight or flight. So not only are you getting positive hormones to combat the stress hormones, but you're also getting your brain to switch off of fight or flight to come down and rest and digest, which is fascinating because everybody will look sideways at first responders for
Oh, all the
laughing
time.
about the trauma. And I mean, if you really know what it's doing for them, like, yeah, they may laugh about actually horrific calls,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
laughter is actually aiding their mental health the whole time, and they don't really realize it, which I think is super cool because, like, that's just a way that y'all have found coping over time, but it actually is scientific. And there's a couple, like, exercising is kind of the same way. It releases, like, running or, like, high stress, like, cardio and stuff. it releases the same positive hormones that can combat whatever, and it regulates your nervous system. And then you're gonna think I'm insane for this one, but tears. You're a crier. I'm a crier.
Oh
Your
yeah.
tears have different chemical makeup when they're happy tears versus sad tears. So happy tears release all the positive hormones, like all the ones from the same with like the laughter thing. But your sad tears, when you're crying like you're upset and processing a lot of things, it actually releases all those stress hormones you have pent up in your body. They come out through your tears. Yeah. So when you're crying it out, you're actually crying out the stress hormones from what you're struggling with, which is crazy. So those are my top 3, like unorthodox, but like
I
they
love it.
actually aid your mental health, which is really cool.
So I love the fact that what I'm naturally enabled to do as a crier is actually helping my mental health. I find that very comforting because there's been numerous times where I'm like, I
Yep.
need to go outside and I just need to sit for a minute. And that's my
Need to go
like,
touch some grass.
yeah, I need to go touch some grass.
Yeah, but it's your brain. I mean, your body is so hardwired to protect itself. It's crazy. So when you think of all those things that are releasing all of those negative things, it really is like the way your body's designed to like protect itself, which I think that's why I nerd out about it because I think it's so cool.
Yeah, it is cool. It is very cool. Then you come back into your buddies inside the firehouse or EMS station. You're like, oh, the allergies are so bad outside.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, acting up out there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that you have a very interesting platform that you have kind of made. And it's funny to me because you see these creators that are posting 5 videos a day.
Yeah.
Well, you're not posting near that volume.
Uh-uh.
And you're just as popular as some of these huge creators, which screams to me that EMS, fire, police, all the first responder, folks, and healthcare too, I'm sure, really feel what you're saying, really can acknowledge that we have a problem and we want to know more about the problem. I think one of the things that we do is when we have a problem, we look for the solution to said problem rather than taking a step back and going, what does this problem actually mean? Because I think
Right.
if we learn some of the things that we've talked about today, we could
Mhm.
probably more rationally attack the problem
100%.
and figure out where to go from here. Because when you're in the midst of something traumatic, the last thing you're thinking is, let me think about what happened and how my brain's working.
Right.
You
Yeah.
don't think about that. From
Right.
somebody who's lived in those trenches for the last 20 years, like that's not something you think about.
Right.
And I know you don't have to say it. I look way too young to have a 20-year career. That's a lie, but I would love to hear it if you just want to
Oh
repeat it
yeah.
back to me. um, here where I live between Mississippi and Tennessee,
Mhm.
Mississippi made car tags, right, for EMS responders. And I was part of that initiative back in like 2009 or 10, something to get that passed through legislature so that we could get our tags.
Mhm.
So my number is 67. Well, now they're up to like 4,396. So my tag is my street cred now. Everybody looks
Oh
at it, it's
yeah.
like, you're so old. I'm like, I'm not old. I'm 38. Leave me alone. I started when I was 18. But
Yeah.
just leave me alone. But I think that you have, man, you have gone through so much in this episode. I'm so excited to
I yap.
get to talk to you, but also I'm excited to get to listen to it again as I edit it down. I'm
Yeah.
so intrigued to see what the end result is for us.
Mm.
So do you have any advice when we seek help? What kinds of things would you suggest for us from a first responder? And I know we've talked about some of these. Kim is a really big supporter of peer support. She's kind of
Mm.
anti-counselor. That's not why she's not here today. It's not because you want to be a counselor.
She said, "No, I don't wanna be with her."
No, no, she's genuinely sick. But my watch is trying to talk to me. I love when it just my fat wrist hits my watch button and it listens to what I'm saying.
Mhm.
And other times it can't understand anything I'm saying because I'm from the South.
Yep.
But she's a big peer support person.
Mm.
I more so have benefited from talk therapy, EMDR, like those kind of things have benefited me. So is there a right or a wrong answer when you talk about mental health?
I don't think so. I think as long as you're talking, you're moving in the right direction, regardless of how that comes out, if it's with your spouse, if it's in therapy. Like, obviously, I think if it's extremity of like PTSD, where it's impairing function, sleep, job,
Mhm.
driving, that thing, obviously that's a little different. And obviously, you'd probably need a therapist that's very specialized in first responders. That's just me. Some people can have great, like, trauma-informed therapists that aren't so much first responder, and have good experiences too, but I just think it's just like you said, like, you just benefit from talk therapy, and I think that's also part of what I think the stigma we talked about is not just stigma of, like, y'all are, like, the weakness and, like, suck it up culture and this and that. There's also a stigma around, like, what mental health could be. So, like, things like especially when, I've heard that when there's, like, counselors or therapists, like, in the department, a lot of times there can be, like, certain fears of, like, fear that it's not fully confidential, or, fear that if you talk and
Mm-hmm.
disclose something, they could potentially, like, pull you off the job, or just like, just the fear in general of, like, seeking somebody that's there. But, I mean, I think that when you're looking for a therapist, it should be definitely first responder focused. If not, I personally think the field needs to obviously change. If you haven't heard me yap the entire hour, the I mean, there need to be other options, obviously, and I want to let first responders know that when you do seek help, it is not just for diagnosis. It is not just when crap hits the fan. Like, that is not the only option. Like you said, talk therapy is super important. I mean, there's just so many options that when you go in, it's like you can be there to then build and grow and have resilience. Like, you can go in to just learn the skills and the coping and be able to just have a space that's not biased to just talk. Like, you can literally just share all your calls unbiased,
Mm-hmm.
not worry about anything, not worrying about traumatizing anybody, and just let it out. Because the amount and the quantity that y'all go through in a short period of time, there needs to be some release, and I think that when it comes to that, I don't think you can go wrong, but I want to encourage first responders that you're not going because you're so far gone. Like, you're going because you want to be better and more efficient in your career. And that's kind of where I stand on that. I don't think that it should be the weakness thing. I think it genuinely is making you stronger in the field.
Where do you think, and this is just an off-topic question
Mhm.
that just came to mind. Where do you think first responders lie when you consider that we're a very proud group of people. We're very proud of what we do. So where do you think this idea comes from when you talk about going to therapy and immediately it's the thought of I'm broken, something's wrong with me?
Mm.
Do you think that there's that stigma that's been created by the mental health profession that does that, or is that something we're just thinking in our head that's just a blatantly untrue thought?
I mean, I think it goes hand in hand. I think there's both. I think there's stigma on the side of, like, mental health and seeking it and, like, what it could do to your job, and if it can impair your job, but I think the stigma goes, like, so far back. I know I was telling you about, like, the history side of it.
Mhm.
I mean, really, if you look back at the mental health initiatives and everything, I mean, there was obviously, like, CISM in the '70s and '80s when it was first created, but until, like, 9/11 was, like, the big push for, like, readily accessible care, because the amount of, deaths, the amount of PTSD and suicide that followed that was, like, immense, and, like, nobody really knew, obviously, like, how to manage that, so that was the biggest push, I think, for mental health, so it's really new, like, it's only in the last 20-ish years that it's been,
Mhm.
like, providing all this care, so I think that is also a part of it, because you have counselors that have been in it pre 9/11 that talk to first responders pre 9/11, and they don't really understand, like, the extent of it sometimes, or there's still, like, upper management that is still, like, pre 9/11 that still is operating on, "We don't talk about that stuff, like, you need to suck it up and handle it." But I think that just also goes back to, like, y'all's job is tough, period, and you kind of have to accept, like, that job is hard and not everybody can do it, but while it's hard, it can also coexist with the struggle. Like, it doesn't mean that they're opposite of each other. But I think that that's definitely the problem, is they kind of assume that since it's a tough job, you have to be tough, but you can also be tough and then be affected by trauma and manage it.
Very good. I actually love that. So tell me one thing that you wish, if you had one thing to say to first responders that are considering seeking help, what's the encouragement to take that first step?
Yeah. I think just the encouragement is, like, you're not alone, period. 80% of first responders will have either PTSD or some other diagnosis related to the job. And again, I want to harp on the fact that there's nothing wrong with you. It's the brain's job to protect you, and that's all it's doing. It's your body is doing what it's hardwired to do, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I think that acknowledging that is more empowering going in to seek mental health help and care, because when you know that you're not at fault for what's going on inside of you, it's just your body, then you can actually be like, okay, it's not my fault. I'm just going to go to therapy and figure it out and be able to then manage it in the future. I think it's so much more taboo and scary than it is, and I
Mhm.
get it, and I 100% understand, especially when there's counselors that are not great, and there's a lot of gap in the field, which needs to change, and there's not a lot of options, and it's sometimes not affordable, accessible, yada, yada. But I do think that, I mean, it shouldn't be scary. That's what the change I want to, make people more aware of is it shouldn't be scary, it should be more so empowering.
Yes, one of the things that I love the most about especially talk therapy with my
Mhm.
therapist is the fact that she is an unbiased witness to what I'm going through. Like I can talk to her, I can say names, I can give her locations, I can do all these things. And it's like to bring my Southern to the forefront, she has no dog in the fight.
Yep,
Like she
yep,
is just there
yep,
to listen to me.
yep,
And she asked me the very first time I walked in, she's like, okay, so how do you want to be communicated with? I said, I
yep,
need you to tell me when I'm being a butthole, because mine is always brought forth through anger.
yep,
So mine is always an angry response, whether it's with my family, whether it's with my coworkers, even with my patients. I'm sad to admit,
mhm. Yeah,
that I've treated people badly
mhm.
in some of their worst days because I was overwhelmed and overworked and overloaded.
Right,
Uh, but I think that my therapist communicates really well, and she is trauma informed, and she's one of the good trauma
right.
informed ones. But
Yeah,
we also here at our service, when we started our peer support program, we partnered with a former paramedic firefighter that went through therapy training like you are and started his own practice for first responders. So we're really lucky in that sense that we have somebody that we refer people to when peer support is not enough and
yeah,
when, our company's, what is it called? Employee assistance, whatever, EAP is not enough. We refer them to
right.
him and he's fantastic and he gets it. And like and my therapist gets it. Like she can
Yeah.
sit there and talk to me and she's worked with first responders as well.
Mhm.
And it just makes all the difference in the world. I would highly encourage anybody listening to this, and I'm sure Logan, you'll agree, to just go. Just
Yeah,
go one time, see if it works. I was in my mind, I was going for one time. This was going to be a one off because I felt like I needed it, blah, blah, blah. I'd had a big outburst and I thought maybe a few sessions would be good. Like I knew I needed help, but once it got started, it just built and built and built and has become a weirdly beautiful relationship between me and my therapist where she gets me and she can tell me you responded very poorly to that,
yeah.
or you can do this, or you can do that. Like, I love going to her.
Um,
So I highly encourage anybody listening to just try it. Just go and talk to somebody because it is worth it. Well, Logan, I think that you have shared some invaluable insights. I really love that you have validated our dark humor and our crying, and you've nerded out with me about brain stuff. I teach PHTLS, and traumatic brain injuries is one of my favorite lectures to give because it's so fascinating to me how the brain works.
yep.
So, getting to even dig more and more into that patho of the brain was my nerd out for the day. So you've made me
Yep.
extremely happy. I hate that Kim couldn't have been here
Perfect.
because she would have loved that as well. So where can listeners find you at?
Yeah, I mean, majority of my first responder stuff is all on TikTok. It's just Logan L Nix. I mean, it's just that we're just authentic there, and all I'm doing is hearing from first responders. That's kind of my entire goal. So,
And I absolutely love, and one of the reasons I reached out to you is I'm always searching for authentic people, and you
yeah,
seemed and still seem so genuine and authentic, and I appreciate that about you.
yeah,
And I think that if you guys go and check out her page, that you will feel that same true genuineness from somebody who is real and somebody who understands us, even if it is from a spouse's perspective. Don't let that weigh on your decision to go check out her stuff because she really does get it. And when she talks about it, you feel it. And I appreciate that about you. Uh, and you really do have a face that just like you are talking to me every time I'm looking at the screen. So I appreciate that about you as well.
Yeah.
You do have some great, and you're looking right in the camera. I love that. I don't know if that's a filter or what, or if
Yep.
that's just you looking, but that's always so good that I feel like you're talking to me. So I think you really do have a message to give. I think you're doing a great job giving it. I hope that your schooling continues to go well
Thank you.
and that you'll be the next first responder therapist that we get to,
Absolutely.
or people in your area get to
Yeah.
reach out and,
Yeah,
see.
definitely.
So, well, as always, it's all done. I always hate this part. This is the most awkward part of the podcast every time. Kim's usually here to say our phrase that we say every show. Unfortunately, you got me today. Again, you can check us out on asilentwarwithin.com. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And you can always stream our episodes on all the streaming platforms. If you guys will do us a favor and just go and rate the show, give it 5 stars, give us some feedback, some comments, that helps them push that out there even more, so we can reach even more people. 4,000 streams is great. We're super excited about that, to be so new and so early in our, I guess, broadcast. I don't know if it's broadcasting, but whatever. We're so early in this venture of ours, and to already have that kind of support is great. We are booked for guests far, far, far out. I think, Logan, you've been on our calendar for a long time.
Yeah.
We've had an overwhelming response from everybody we've asked. Everybody has been willing, so we're appreciative of that. Go check us out. Go rate us. Go listen to the show. Share it with your friends. This is not something that we ever started to get famous. That's not what we're here for. We're here to let people know that you're not alone and that we've been through it too, and that you're not broken. You are definitely not any different than anybody else. We have experienced some of these things too. We share that journey every week. Logan, thank you for coming on the show. And as always, be safe, take care of your mind, and we'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.
You've been listening to A Silent War Within. If this episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, you're not alone and your well-being matters. It's time to end this silent war.